Atiku withdraws court case against INEC. INEC begins distribution of sensitive materials for governorship and state assembly polls. And INEC denies appointing ex-Lagos commissioner as head of ICT. And outside of Nigeria, thousands of Senegal opposition supporters joined three-day protest. And United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken meets Ethiopian leader to repair ties damaged by war. Join us on PHQ today. I have Opatola Victor, a legal practitioner, and much later I'll be joined by Agnes Sessi, Nigerian Labour Congress chairman of Lagos chapter, who will be joining us on the program. I am Gbenga Aborow. Stay with us. Politics HQ. We'll be right back. The Federal High Court sitting in Abuja last week ordered INEC to allow electorates with temporary voters' cards exercise their franchise after allegations of voter disenfranchisement against INEC during the presidential and National Assembly elections. The fresh court order may see INEC yield to the demands of many people. The governorship elections will be happening in 31 of 36 states, with Imo, Kogi and Bayelsa states scheduled to hold the governorship polls later in the year. The court's decision is expected to improve the voter turnout in different states in comparison with what was seen during the presidential elections, where only 29% of registered voters participated in the elections, a turnout regarded as the lowest in Nigeria's electoral history. Many analysts have blamed INEC for the low participation, and all eyes are on the commission as Nigerians prepare to vote again. Now, joining me to discuss all of this is Opatola Victor, a legal practitioner. A warm welcome to you, Victor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Victor, what is your reaction to the recent court order allowing eligible voters with temporary voters' cards to participate in the March 18th governorship and state houses of assembly elections?
It is a victory for democracy. It is a good news for inclusion. That means that with this judgment, those that are precluded, those that are validly registered and fulfilled all legal requirements to get their PVC, who were precluded from getting their PVC, thereby voting. With this judgment, they can, be able to vote in this gubernatorial election.
Victor, could you explain the legal basis for Justice Eguatu's order to allow eligible voters with TVCs to participate in the elections? What's the implication of this court order for the upcoming elections and the electoral process in Nigeria in general?
Okay, in order to break it down, two individuals approached the court, to determine their right to vote using their temporary voters card. And the court decided, first of all, there's this principle in the judgment that everybody who has validly registered to vote and their names and details is contained in the INEC database, and INEC has issued them their temporary voters card, should not be precluded from voting using their temporary voters card. Now, this decision is premised on the ground that the temporary voters card and the permanent voters card, there is no substantial difference between both of them. This means that the BVOS machine, which is used in this election, when it comes to verification of voters, voters are verified through three different means. Voters can be verified using their surname. They can be verified using the last few digits of their voter identification number, which is contained on both the permanent voters card and the temporary voters card. The third means that BVOS verify is through the barcode on your voters card. So in essence, the court has said that, no law makes a distinction between the permanent voters card and the temporary voters card. So individuals who have the temporary voters card can actually vote.
Is the temporary voters card not in paper form? I believe in the TV and the PVC, it's in a more durable plastic form.
Please, can you come again? I didn't get your question.
Is the temporary voters card not in paper form, and the PVC in a more durable plastic form, regardless of the barcode and the details on it?
Yes. The difference between the temporary voters card and the permanent voters card is the plastic nature of the permanent voters card. Now, there are some voters who, when they registered between 2021 and 2022, they were issued temporary voters card, and this temporary voters card contains a barcode. Those that were issued by voters card before 2021 has no barcode. Now, this is it. The Beavers machine, when the Beavers machine wants to verify an intending voter, it verifies you through any of these three means. It can verify you using your surname. It can verify you using your voter identification number, which is contained, the last few digits of your voter identification number, which is contained on both the temporary voters card and the permanent voters card. The third one is that it can identify you, it can verify you using the barcode. Now, the barcode is on the permanent voters card, and the barcode is on the temporary voters card of those that registered between 2021 and 2022. Meanwhile, those that registered prior before 2021 has no barcode. But the issue is that the barcode is not the only means of verifying an intending voter using the Beavers machine. The Beavers machine can effectively verify you using your surname or the last few digits of your voter identification number, which is contained on the temporary voters card. So that is the rationale behind the decision of the court that, previously, when we were using card reader, you can only use a plastic permanent voters card on card reader because you need to slot it into the card reader. But these Beavers, you don't need to slot the plastic nature of the permanent voters card into the Beavers. What the Beavers need to verify you are informations which you can give without the plastic nature of the permanent voters card.
Thank you, Victor. And I believe because of the details you have and the barcode, so even if somebody goes ahead to forge it, you need to have those details. So it would not, the Beavers would not read the details correctly, even if it's forged, because some people might be thinking, oh, it's temporary, so it'll be easy to forge and mass produce. Thank you for clearing things. Yes.
Before we round up, let me just make a clarification. The barcode is not the only way in which the Beavers can verify you. It can verify you using your surname alone. It can verify you using your voter identification number alone. Then it can also verify you using your barcode alone. So there cannot be issue of forgery, because after verification is accreditation. Then accreditation, at the point of accreditation, you use your thumbprint or your facial, to accredit you. Nobody has to thumbprint. So even if somebody comes and say is the voter and is the surname and every other thing, at the point of accreditation, where they will use your thumbprint or your facial recognition, it will show that you are not the one. So what is important is what the court has decided, and the principle is what is important, not the fact that two people went to court. What is important is that what makes these two people eligible to vote using their temporary voters card is also applicable, both fact and law, to millions of Nigerians who are registered to vote, who have their details on the database of INEC, and who have their temporary voters card. That is what is important. So
now, Victor, I'm happy you've established those facts, but the natural inclination, one might feel, for INEC is to support this decision by the court, because they will want more people to participate in the electoral process. But INEC has decided to appeal this court order. What do they hope to achieve with this appeal, and when are we likely to get a ruling? Because we have elections in a few days' time.
Now, first of all, let me clarify this. As at today, INEC has not appealed as at today, because if they've appealed, they will have served the respondent a valid notice of appeal, and the respondent have not gotten any notice of appeal. And importantly, An appeal does not invalidate this judgment. What invalidates this judgment is a judgment of the Court of Appeal, which is the Federal Court. Or at best, if INEC is able to get a stay of execution on this judgment, which they've not gotten as at today. So this judgment is valid, this judgment is subsisting. As at today, this judgment is the law. So we call on INEC not to systematically disenfranchise millions of Nigerians. If INEC has decided to go on appeal, then it should go on appeal. But what it means is that a body which is saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that people register to vote and people participate effectively in the voting process in a free and fair process, is also taking steps to block off, people who are eligible to vote. That is tantamount to going against the principles, backing and, fundamental principles backing INEC. So what is important for us to know is that if INEC decides to appeal, that means it's perpetrating itself as a systemic form of disenfranchising millions of Nigerians who are ready to vote using their temporary voters card. But as of today, there is no appeal. There is no judgment of Court of Appeal against this judgment of Federal High Court. This judgment that allows people to use their temporary voters card to vote is valid and subsisting, and it is the law.
Now, we have elections in Saturday, governorship and State House of Assembly elections. How does the court's decision to allow TVCs impact the integrity and transparency of the electoral process in Nigeria? And are we likely going to see a surge in numbers of voters if the status quo as we speak remains, if the court does not decide otherwise?
Okay, now, first of all, democracy is a beautiful thing. The voting process is a fundamental part of democracy. Now, when people go out en masse to exercise their franchise, to speak, make their decision using their vote, en masse in large number, what it gives the government is legitimacy. Now, the last presidential election is, it has been observed that people did not come out en masse to vote.
The turnout was the lowest in the history of Nigerian elections.
With this judgment, it will allow people to come out en masse to vote who they want. It will also confer legitimacy on whoever emerged from the process.
So INEC does have a duty to pass this message to its ad hoc staff that is, barring no change to the situation, if the TVCs are allowed to allow voters, because it's a very important part of the process to educate its ad hoc staff that TVCs will be allowed on Saturday. Now, do you think the use of TVCs is a viable alternative to the use of PVCs? And what are the pros and cons of both methods?
It is not what I believe, it is what is the fact. In the last general election, there are certain individuals who voted using their temporary voters card. Now, let us ask ourselves, and INEC does not need any additional technology to ensure that people vote using their temporary voters card. It does not need any additional effort to ensure or to allow people to vote using their temporary voters card. There is no additional technology needed. There's no additional effort needed. Like I said earlier on, the purpose of voters card in this era of beavers is the purpose of verification. That's the purpose of voters card. And verification does not have only one means. Verification is not only one way. Verification using the beavers is through three means: through your surname, through your voter identification number, and through the barcode. That means if you don't have one, if you don't have the three, if you have one of these three things, you'll be verified using the beavers machine. So INEC does not need any additional technology to allow people express their democratic wish, to allow people to express their franchise. So if INEC does not obey the court order, what it means is that INEC is incompetent. What it means is that INEC is part of the endemic system that is hell-bent on disenfranchising millions of Nigerians.
Now, I'm wondering why this sort of case did not come up in the past, the use of TVCs in replacement of TVCs for those that have not received their permanent voters' cards, rather. What has made the difference, and what makes it easy for people with temporary voters' cards and now to be able to vote without a permanent voters' card?
Previously, there have been quite a number of lawsuits, to ensure that people are able to use their temporary voters card. But they were met with one resistance or the other, so they did not succeed. Now, this succeeded. Now, the question is, why is this coming now? Why is this judgment coming now? Why didn't it come later? Now, in law, there's what is called local standard in law. So that means if the plaintiffs in this matter had approached the court earlier, they wouldn't have the local standard. Because for them to approach the court to enforce their right, they should be able to show that INEC has closed the collection of permanent voters card. So you can't sue INEC that you want to use your temporary voters card when the collection of permanent voters card is still ongoing. So it was after INEC closed the collection of permanent voters card, and it became obvious to the plaintiffs that this will effectively disenfranchise them if they do not go to court. That was why they went to court, and henceforth, what led to this judgment.
Now, Victor, what are the potential challenges of implementing the court's decision to allow TVCs, and how can they be addressed? Do you see any obstacles on the way between now and Saturday? Because INEC came out to say they're going to appeal this judgment. As we speak, you said they haven't appealed the judgment and the courts haven't decided otherwise. So are we expecting a statement from INEC? Should INEC come out and say, look, we'll let the court have its way, or we've decided to withdraw our appeal? What should INEC do in order to prevent Nigerians from and prevent confusion before Saturday?
I don't see the benefits of INEC appealing this matter. I'm not INEC, I'm not holding brief for them. But, the joy of INEC should be when people come out en masse to vote. That should be the joy of this electoral management body. That should be their joy. Like I said earlier on, there is no separate or additional technology needed to allow people to vote use their temporary voters card. The current system, the current technology that is on ground is all that is needed. INEC need no special additional effort to allow people use their temporary voters card to vote. Now, the judgment was given last week, Thursday. There has been resistance on the part of INEC. They've not come out with a position allowing the people to use their temporary voters card. They said they will appeal. Till today, there has been no judgment. There has been no order against the judgment allowing the temporary voters card. So as we can see, there is a huge reluctance on the part of INEC. So I will call on Nigerians to raise a clarion call to INEC, not to disenfranchise millions of Nigerians who are eligible to vote, for INEC to follow the principle in this judgment that anybody who has effectively registered to vote, whose details is contained in the INEC database, and have their temporary voters card, should be eligible to vote using their temporary voters card. So the reluctance is on the part of INEC, and their hell-bent nature in ensuring that people are disenfranchised of their right to vote using temporary voters card in this coming election. And let me state very clearly that the judgment also stated that there is no difference. There is no law that made a difference between the temporary voters card and the permanent voters card. What the law, both the Constitution and the Electoral Act, observed and stated was was the voters card. There's no discrepancy as far as the law is concerned. So INEC should allow people use their temporary voters card to vote according to the tenets of democracy, and allow people to express and exercise their franchise.
Now, Victor, looking at the logistics and how elections are conducted, will these citizens with temporary voters cards have their names published in the voters' roll that is pasted in polling units? Because if it didn't happen during the presidential elections, what's the guarantee that it will happen now? Because it goes beyond just presenting a TVC to the electoral officers.
I didn't get the question first.
You normally have voters' roll calls published at the polling unit. Will this also happen with voters with the TVCs? Because their names didn't appear. I want to believe that their names didn't appear in the roll call at the presidential elections that happened a few weeks ago. So how do we overcome this obstacle?
Now, the way that works is that the names that are pasted at the polling unit are names of people who are eligible to vote in that polling unit. It is not names of people who have their permanent voters card.
Okay.
It is names. What you say?
No, I just wanted to get that point clear, that it's names of people who are eligible to vote, whether you have a TVC or a permanent voters card.
Yeah. So the names that are pasted at the polling unit are names of people eligible to vote. It is not names of only people who have permanent voters card. It is altogether the names of everybody eligible to vote at that polling unit. So there's no discrimination of whether those that are pasted on the wall there are only those that have their permanent voters card. It is both that have their permanent voters cards and temporary voters card, because both of them are eligible to vote.
Thank you, Victor. Now, what's the public's reaction to this court order, and how does it reflect the level of trust in INEC and the electoral process in Nigeria?
Now, the public has accepted this judgment with, wide jubilation and optimism, but the disposition of INEC, in regards to their appeal, is actually trying to pour water on the mind of the people, especially making them feel as if the mere intention or attempt of INEC to appeal, or the mere fact that INEC will appeal, has countered the judgment or nullified the judgment or made the judgment nugatory, which is not the truth. Even if INEC appeals today, until there is a valid and subsisting judgment or order, this judgment is, or order nullifying this judgment or staying this judgment is the law, is the position of the law, and is valid and subsistent today.
Now, I like how you ended that last point. It's valid and it will be the law until the courts decide. So what are the implications of the court's decisions for future elections and the use of PVCs, permanent voters cards and temporary voters cards in the electoral process? Will this be a thing to stay, a permanent feature in our electoral process if the courts don't decide otherwise?
This judgment is far-reaching. It is a watershed in electoral jurisprudence in this country. It is a landmark judgment in electoral jurisprudence in this country. What it means is that henceforth, unless and until this judgment is probably overturned on appeal by superior judgment, this judgment remains the law. And what it means is that people can, vote with their temporary voters card, because INEC cannot observe the right of only two individuals. The principle of law is that equality is equity. If the facts and situation and law that applies to these two individuals who went to court also applies to millions of Nigerians, then what justification does INEC have to only observe the right of these two individuals and not observe the right of millions of Nigerians who are also in the same fact and shoes as these two individuals? So like I said earlier on, equality is equity. So INEC should observe this judgment and allow this judgment. Well-meaning Nigerians should raise a clarion call to INEC not to disenfranchise them and to follow the law and follow and observe this judgment.
Victor, you're right when you say, this judgment is a landmark judgment and a watershed moment in Nigeria's electoral jurisprudence. Now, how can INEC and Nigeria improve its electoral process and ensure that all eligible voters are able to exercise their right to vote, regardless of their access to PVCs or TVCs? How can they make this PVCs or TVCs available to all eligible Nigerians without struggle? And you have a situation where people queue for days, they have to live, work. It's almost a hassle.
The onus now is on INEC to observe the judgment of the court. The onus is on INEC to observe the judgment of the court. Like I said earlier on, INEC does not need a separate, different, or new technology to allow people to use their temporary voters card. The present technology, the present system on ground is enough to allow people to use their temporary voters card to vote. Anybody who voted in the last presidential, in the last general election, the last just recently concluded election, would testify to the fact that you do not actually need the plastic nature of the permanent voters card to vote. The information on your temporary voters card is enough to verify you, after which you will be accredited. If you are not the right voter, at the point of accreditation, it will show by your thumbprint or your facial recognition. So INEC needs no separate technology. The onus is on INEC to allow this judgment and observe it and follow it. And also, like I said earlier on, Nigerians should come together and call on INEC to observe this judgment and follow the law.
Now, Victor, just before we begin to wrap up our conversation, from your own point of view, are there any potential drawbacks to the use of temporary voters' cards for voting? And if so, what are they? And I'm thinking in terms of logistics and if INEC has to do some reconfiguration, voter education exercise, and looking at the fact that we're also just a few days to the gubernatorial polls.
There is none.
Absolutely none that you could think of.
What do you say?
Absolutely none that you could think of from your point of view.
Yeah, there is none. There is none at all.
Now, finally, before I let you go, Victor, how will the court order be enforced? And what recourse is available to those who may be affected by the ruling?
Like I said earlier on, we, on our part, as the lawyer to the plaintiff, we believe that INEC is a law-abiding body, and they still have time to retrace their steps, and follow the judgment of the court, so that they will not be in contempt of the court. There's still time, to retrace their steps and, ensure that people are allowed to use their temporary voters card to vote. We would not like to tread the alternative.
Thank you very much. Opatola Victor, legal practitioner, joined us from Abuja. I do appreciate your contribution to the program. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.